Welcome back to Western Approach's open channel. If you're new here, Mondays are where I plan to step away from the more polished Thursday uploads and do something a little looser. These are more conversational videos with less editing, less B-roll, just me talking things through with you and hopefully sparking a little bit of dialogue. Today I thought I'd pull back the curtain on the episode list I've been building up. These are the ideas sitting on my desk right now. Some are pretty well developed and not bad. Some are minimally developed and not great. So some will almost definitely see the light of day and others might never get made. But I wanted to put them out here partly so you can see where I'm headed and partly so I can hear from you. Which ones spark something in you and which ones feel necessary? And is there anything missing I should add to the list and anything you'd like to see me make a video on? Because one of the best parts of this channel, by far, has been the exchanges that have happened in the comments. I've had great conversations with DOPs, colorists, editors, filmmakers, people with decades of experience and people with very little experience. And all of those conversations have changed and informed how I think about certain workflows or even entire past episodes. And that's been one of the great privileges I've discovered of making videos for YouTube. It's really not just me talking to the void, which is what I anticipated. It's actually building a dialogue with a much broader community than I ever thought I'd have access to. Right, here's the working list. I tried to divide it into groupings so it makes sense, but so they don't really reflect the publish groupings, if that makes sense. So here are some FX6 related ones. A Sony FX6 long-term review. I've had mine for a few years now, and I think it probably deserves a proper long-term review. The honeymoon period is well and truly over, and so if there's interest, I'd like to do a video in how it really holds up after, I had it 3 years maybe, and still in day-to-day use. Sony FX6 Mark II. It feels inevitable that Mark II will appear at some point, and I've got a list of features I think would actually make a difference. And I kind of have a rough idea of the likelihood that they would be to appear on the Mark II version. And the FX6 is actually an area I'd really like your input and steer on. I think the FX6 is still one of the most capable cameras in the industry. It ticks a lot of boxes, but for some reason it doesn't really generate much hype anymore. It's not just the fact that it's not a shiny new thing. I mean, the Komodo X isn't that much of a shiny new thing these days, but the FX6 is, I think, a little bit conspicuously overlooked. So that makes me wonder, do you or does anyone still really want any FX6 content? Then I've got a whole tranche of Komodo X related videos I'd quite like to make. One of the reasons is because whenever I make a Komodo X video, it gets enormous engagement and response, which is really encouraging because that kind of reflects how I feel about the camera. So here are some episode ideas around that. I'd quite like to do Red versus Sony, except the Red will be a Komodo X and the Sony won't be the FX6 or the A7S III. That's the sort of the conceit. It will actually be a handy cam. It sounds kind of daft, so it's partly a tongue-in-cheek style video, but also a real comparison of how wildly different tools can actually get really exciting results out of them. I recommended a documentary last week called Listers, and incredibly talented filmmakers behind the camera on that. And a lot of it was shot on a Handycam-like camcorder. And that added to the texture and richness and authenticity of the project. So that kind of reminded me that I had this Handycam and I should probably be a bit more serious about if and when to use it. Another episode would be a year with the Red Komodo X. A look back at what it's actually been like to live with and own the camera, especially after that initial hype and unfamiliarity wore off. I've shown my minimal and maximalist rig builds, and I wouldn't mind doing an episode showing the rig that I most commonly use. And also I have a refinement in the works for the lightweight build that I'm just waiting on one more part from, and that I think will be quite a fun thing to look at. So kind of practical builds that aren't just over-spec'd fantasy or ultra minimal impractical builds. This is on my list because a few people have asked me for it, but a look at the Red IPP2 color workflow. So a bit of my grading process for R3D and kind of how I handle red footage from start to finish. I did find that when I tried to talk about color and do some on-screen voiceover tutorial stuff, that it was quite a poor performing video. It doesn't really matter. I'm not too fussed about that. I think it would be easy to find that kind of thing disheartening. My objective isn't really viewing numbers, although it's quite exciting when you get big numbers. It's just to kind of make something that would have helped me 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, at some point in my prior journey. Another episode I would quite like to do on the KX is looking at the question of, I think there's a lot of talk about it being too much for solo shooters, which I completely disagree with, but looking at how you manage operating it without a crew. So these sort of KX videos likely live more in the Komodo hype, red hype ecosystem. I really want to make sure I make videos that have genuine value and authenticity, rather than just glossy show-offs and love-ins of the camera hardware itself, which is unquestionably nice. Like, obviously, I can't deny that. Now moving on to some video ideas in the broader gear and workflow realm. I'd really like to do a bit of a look at unexpectedly great gear from adjacent or alternative industries. I've got a fantastic tote bag that I use for carrying a fully rigged camera, and it's completely not designed for film work, but it's brilliant. It's roll top, waterproof. I've made a quilted liner to protect the sides from knocks and bashes. So there are a few things like that that are kind of co-opted from other industries, and I found them exceptionally good value for money and highly useful. So I'd like to look at those. Coming up on my more imminent to film list is a Athena Prime review. I've got a 5-lens set in PL, and I've been shooting with them for the last year, really. Recently, for the first time, I've used the 85mm, which you may have seen, and a few people have asked me for it, so that's coming soon. I've also got an Easy Rig. It's a Mini Max with a stable arm, so I would like to look at the pros and cons of that, and it was quite expensive, so really looking at it from a value for money point of view is what I'll be doing. Another bit of kit I find completely fantastic and use all the time is the DJI transmission. So I did wonder about doing a review on that, but there's so many really competent reviews and just content around it on YouTube already that I'm not really sure I'd be able to add anything to that body of material, media. So yeah, I've got a bit of a question mark over that one. But I'm a big advocate for it. It's a fantastic bit of kit. I've recently started working with a company called Focusrat, and they make the Rat Bag. And because of my lukewarm ambivalence towards the Easy Rig, I've found the Rat Bag to be a really good alternative, and it's also a fraction of the price. I've only been using it for a couple of weeks, and already it's changing my workflow. I've got a very busy month of work coming up, and I think it's going to be traveling with me for all of it. And so if I find it useful, I know that there are other solo shooters that will also likely find it useful. So this is kind of like the kit nerd corner of the list. But I think that some of these could be really useful practical episodes because they're completely based on real use rather than just specs and like short trials with products. Another category of videos I'd quite like to make more surrounds the craft and philosophy of video making. One of those key ones for me would be about my muse and why I film my partner. Not sure if she's thrilled about that idea though. But a bit more of a personal episode about Meg and how filming her and recently filming with her has shaped my work and allowed me to develop. One of the things clients I think seek me out for is I've become quite adept at getting quite a dark, luxurious look, even on bright days. And so I'd like to talk about that because it's been a bit of a commodity for me that I've been able to monetize. Because I live in the southwest in Cornwall, on this peninsula jutting out into the North Atlantic, I'd love to make an episode on how to film in quite challenging conditions and environments, because it is often quite challenging here. We get very little sunshine and settled weather, which would also be, filming a content idea around that could also be spectacular because I could just travel around the county and go to all the nice places in bad weather. So that's a big yes from me. I actually haven't done an awful lot of traveling this year, but last year I tried to go on holiday every month. We didn't succeed, but managed 10 months. And part of that, I really enjoyed shooting these chintzy little, I call them travel postcards, but rather than take holiday stills, I was making little video vignettes. And it's a small, simple process that really focuses your mind on composition, framing. And yeah, I'd like to travel a little bit to do that, but really talk about it. And you see some, I think I was inspired by seeing someone do basically the same, but around Japan while they're on holiday. And their little video postcards were getting millions of Instagram views. I was like, wow, I could do that. And obviously I can't do it quite as well, but I can do it nearly as well. And I don't get millions of views on Instagram, but never mind, I'm working on it. Another episode in this same kind of vein is, and I see a lot of Videosphere creators do this episode specifically, but talk about how to get the film look as a beginner, and look at some of the big questions that I had when I was first making professional video. Interestingly, Dehancer actually approached me and said, would I like to make a video in collaboration with them? I told him no. And I have a fully, Dehancer Pro lifetime license, and I use it quite a lot. But I didn't really want to muddy the waters at this stage by having a relationship with a plugin like that. Because again, I've seen a lot of content that is not shadow sponsored, but the relationship between the person making the content and the product that they are talking about can be a little bit uncomfortably blurred or obscured at times. So I didn't want to put myself in that situation, because I want to be able to talk about the product without any fetters or inhibition. And if I'm talking about how to get a film look as a newcomer, I can talk about Dehancer, but then I can also bitch about how it is an absolute resource hog, and it's one of the reasons I'm having to upgrade my freaking Mac. I'd like to stand up on the top of the highest hill and hold a big sign that says, stop shooting wide open, it sucks, and talk about why chasing shallow depth of field isn't always the most important of pursuits. And that will be from the position of someone who went out of his way to collect fast photo primes to use with his Sony video bodies so that I could get that full frame shallow depth of field look. It's taken until this point in my slowly maturing video making journey to realize that that's not what filmmaking is all about. So I'd like to talk about that, and I can really empathize with people who are still, further back from me on that same curve, working these things out for themselves. Another episode, and it kind of would overlap a little bit with the Focus Rat and the Easy Rig videos, but is embracing shaky footage and why handheld camera motion can really enhance certain storytelling. There's something valuable in there. That was another thing that I spent a long time trying to avoid, was any shake or jitter in my camera work at all. And as soon as you realize that you can just lean into it and add the movement, you instantly start making better video. I'm a big believer in sweating the details, and I'd like to look at why obsessing over gear actually matters, especially with like the minutiae, like which size and positioning of, like for instance on the Komodo, side rails you choose. I've got 3 or 4 of them, each trying to hone in on the right one. And all of this is me trying to improve each little aspect of the camera, or ergonomics, or workflow, or kit loadout. And even if it's only a 1% improvement here and a 1% improvement there, like all these things have a cumulative value. And there's a real pleasure in sort of honing in on it. It's the same approach I take to kind of everything, from sort of networking and NASDAQs to my dirt bike to saving lives at sea. All of these things are iterative improvements rather than big phase or state changes. So I'd like to look at that and think about how it applies to video kit and video making. Another thing more on the craft of making a video is why shadows are your friend, which is one of those simple mantras that has completely changed how I shoot. And now I'm looking for contrast and darkness as much as I'm looking for nice light. I think that would be a nice tutorial type episode. There's a filmmaker called Wim Wenders, or Wim Wenders potentially, and one of his main pieces of advice was hold the frame. And so talking about why patience and restraint behind the camera can also lead to as valuable unexpected a moment as adventurousness and risk-taking. So they're both completely valuable traits for a camera operator to have. So the above is some of the episodes I'm broadly most excited about. 1 or 2, like I said, some of the FX6 stuff, I want your opinion on them really. And there's a lot that are less about gear and more about the philosophy of filmmaking, which I'm interested in as well, and stuff that motivates me to pick up a camera in the first place. Then there are a category of episodes, or potential episodes, that I would quite like to make, and they're kind of on, I suppose, workflow and post-production. So I've already mentioned the Red IPP2 color workflow, that's one of them. I'd like to talk about setting up my garage studio and how I've improved it over time. Most of the time it's just somewhere where I tinker with the motorbike. One of the challenges with it has been setting up the backdrop and getting decent audio out of it, that remains a bit of a challenge because it's quite a harsh space. And because it is also 50% studio, 50% garage, I don't really want to do too much sound treatment in there because I need it to use it as a workspace quite often. Optimizing my editing workstation. I'm quite pleased with my desk at the moment, workstation rather. There's something to be said about having a nice workspace. And I'm a big believer in quality of environment having a big impact on quality of work and quality of mental health. So there's a conversation to be had around that. Like a lot of you, I expect, I've been deep in Videosphere YouTube for a number of years, and there's some fantastic advice out there. There's also some absolutely mid advice out there. So I wouldn't mind having a look at things I consider to be bad advice. But I think that's kind of like a fun idea for a video, kind of like counter to the grain of most of them. A little bit of myth busting and debunking stuff that I find doesn't really hold up when you put it into practice. Though I 100% believe that a good filmmaker doesn't have to have the latest camera or technology. Nevertheless, nice gear is nice. And that's the entire episode. Nice gear is nice. I'd like to make a tongue-in-cheek but honest reflection on the fact that actually good gear really can help in some respects. And if nothing else, it's just nice to use. You get sort of like pride of ownership. Why do we have any nice things? So I don't know really quite where that fits into the episode plan, but I like the idea of it. So that's a little bit of a rundown as to some episode types I'm thinking of. Like I said at the top, not all of them will likely get made, but they're sort of what I'm selecting from when I think, ooh, what episode should I make for next week's slot? So here's where you come in. Which of these would you most like to see? And which ones do you think, nah, that's not for me? And is there anything you think should be added that I haven't even thought about yet? And on top of that, I'd really love to know how you'd like me to balance the FX6 content versus Komodo X content. Like I mentioned, the FX6 is a fantastic workhorse. I'm filming on it now, but it just doesn't get much hype anymore. So the Komodo X still, even after a couple of years, remains the shiny new tool that pulls audience attention. And I'd really like to cover them both, because I genuinely use both. So it would help though to know where you stand. Do you have any interest in in-depth FX6 videos? Or should I just focus on the Komodo? Or is there a sweet spot somewhere in the middle and showing how the two complement each other, can be cut and graded together? You tell me. I'll pin the list in the comments so that you can add your vote or suggestions. And as always with this fledgling open channel segment, this isn't just me broadcasting a plan, that's certainly not the intention, but it's about shaping the direction of the channel together. So once again, thank you for astonishingly watching, and thanks for being part of this conversation, and hopefully see you Thursday for whatever my main upload is.